five test. What's high five test?
High five sounds
Say strength like that.
I mean, some of them replicate. Okay, we're live. Hi everyone. Welcome to Quick Connect Live. So today's session, we're going to talk again about attachment styles, but we're going to expand on our previous session where we established what attachment styles are, what the forces of attachment styles are. And well, I think there was some conversation about can we have some examples of what each of these attachment styles look like. So that's kind of how we're following up, right? And today Ethan has put together examples.
Some videos.
Seems like we're quite attached to this topic.
Yeah, we are very attached to the topic. No worries. Yeah, it's all especially because
avoidant, no, just kidding. Ambivalent.
I think especially because of the fact that this topic attaches itself to our relationships very much. I think it is good that we actually go a little bit further into like what is actually within these relationships, because the theory side is on its own, right? Like being able to see what it looks like is a different story altogether. So if you anybody who actually has been watching any movies or has been actually checking up anything on attachment styles, any of the videos on YouTube so far?
I haven't gone to search, but recently I watched this movie called Instant Family. Yeah, I think it was about people who wanted to foster kids. It's inspired by a true story, and I thought that was actually quite interesting.
Instant Family, isn't that Mark Wahlberg on Netflix?
Yeah, it was on Netflix, but I can't remember.
Yeah, Mark Wahlberg. Yeah. Sorry, I know all the movies.
So, like, you see, my memory is not good, right? So when I watched it, I was thinking, hey, the attachment theory thing all came, right? So the eldest foster daughter was like, didn't believe that she could be loved by the foster parent, or at least she didn't feel it that way. Yes. And then she was very attached to her mother, which had, was incarcerated for drug addictions and things like that.
Yeah.
So that whole, I mean, I didn't watch it for attachment theory, but now that we're talking about it, I can see some of the connections of like avoidant.
Yeah, so this is where I think a lot of the parts about this organized versus anxious versus avoidant is very unclear, because is avoidant just running away? Is avoidant being dismissive, which is what now they typically call dismissive avoidant, and then there's fearful avoidant. So what happens is that I actually went to read up a little bit more about this, and then what YouTube videos, a lot of them talk about is using another way of describing it, because I think disorganized sounds too vague. So they split it into fearful avoidant, which is disorganized, and dismissive avoidant.
Right.
So this is where it's really interesting, because how we function in each of them is a little bit different. So I'm just going to share Tony Stark is a classic dismissive avoidant.
Take that off. What are you?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Will that be all, Mr. Stark?
Yes, that will be all, Miss Rushman. Thank you very much.
I want one.
No.
Dad went to 7-Eleven to get scratchers. I guess he won because that was 6 years ago.
Which happens, Dad's leave. No need to be a pussy about it. Here's what I need.
Text.
If you notice, all of that, right? Let's just start from there. Why do people call that dismissive avoidant?
He doesn't like face his own emotions, or he's not comfortable with that degree of intimacy and things like that, right?
He doesn't even engage when people show any form of interest towards him or any form of things. So when somebody asks him a question, what are you? His first reaction is to give up all the bombastic terms. That is what creates dismissive avoidant. So do you have dismissive avoidant people in your life? Like, if you think about it, right? Let's just look at it. How many people do you know every time you say something that you care for them or you're trying to do something for them and they start dismissing you right off the bat? That's dismissive avoidant. So let's go back to this, right? Okay, so because the interesting thing about this is that when I was checking out the videos, the number of dismissive avoidant is a lot more than any other attachment styles. There's a lot more examples. So in this video, right, that I just showed you guys, hold on. So I found this on YouTube that tries to talk about this. they spent about half the video talking about dismissive avoidant people. Why? Because they're more interesting characters. So let's just go on a bit more.
Narcissism. Agreed?
So what's it really like to be Chuck Bass? Were you a happy kid? When did you start drinking in bars alone?
When I realized hot, desperate women drank in bars for me.
What was your father like?
Me.
So he avoids all the questions proper. He doesn't really engage on the stories. He doesn't actually deal with the real questions that is already underlying. So when dismissive avoidant people deal with this kind of different things, what happens is that in general, this is their disposition towards almost all things.
Only older.
And then the interesting scene is this part.
If you'll excuse me, I'm going to pursue a more fulfilling pastime. Hey.
Hey.
Why should I?
So if you look at it, right, he's the classic bad boy. Why do they classify this under dismissive avoidant? Okay, let me ask you guys, anybody here who is actually dismissive avoidant?
For a moment, I thought you were going to ask anybody here is actually a playboy.
I know all four of us, so there's no chance.
Okay. I think I'm probably ambivalent more than anything. So anyone here feels that they are dismissive avoidant?
That means whenever somebody shows affection towards them, they actually feel uncomfortable. Oh, Paylin.
But I'm not sure whether I'm dismissive avoidant. But I think maybe I don't feel the same way towards the person, then I would feel a bit like uncomfortable if the person tries to be too affectionate. So I do not know whether that means I'm dismissive avoidant.
But that's normal, right? I mean, if some stranger come out and starts being too cozy with you, you also feel a bit weird, right? I think
Yeah.
that's
So
normal.
that's why am I dismissive avoidant? Most people feel this way, right?
When you put your guards up, again, so so there are the reactive elements. So you behave like a dismissive avoidant when somebody who you're not interested in engaging with tries to cozy up to you. When we talk about dismissive avoidant attachment styles, the classic version of this is in intimate relationships, whether it's a family, closed ones, or loved ones, meaning like romantic relationships, that you behave like this towards them as well.
Then it's not me lah. I think it's still okay.
Okay.
I think I'm still okay in close relationships.
Yeah. I found this video very interesting because it actually classified all the Harry Potter characters. That's very interesting, right? Like, what? Okay. And so guess what's Harry Potter's style according to this video? Anybody who watched all the Harry Potter movies and actually followed it all the way through? Okay, cool.
I don't think he's avoidant. Is he avoidant?
So actually, he's dismissive avoidant. There's a reason why he ended up with Ginny.
Yeah, I'm like trying to recall Harry Potter now. It's been ages.
Yeah. I only remember the spells.
Oh my god, you actually remember the spells?
No, as in I remember the magic wands and all that, but not how they are in terms of relationships.
Yeah, I find it most interesting because, like, for me, these movies defined a lot of young people's lives. And actually analyzing them makes it very interesting for me because it makes you kind of just hyper aware of how their behaviors actually shape a lot of people's thinking.
I just remember the part, I can't remember which episode it was, right? So he's all grown up. Then he was holding the Horcrux or something, right? Which makes him really, really bad-tempered and then he pushes everyone away. Away. Maybe that's why he says.
No. That's not during the Horcrux moments. I mean, that's supposed to be like the moments where he's doing that. But the interesting part is why this video actually says that is because the examples they gave were quite interesting. Yeah, so a lot of these are behavioral examples.
Are you showing the Harry Potter video?
This one.
I'll be in my bedroom, making no noise and pretending that I don't exist.
Harry.
Hi there.
Not to be rude or anything, but this isn't a great time for me to have a house elf in my bedroom.
Tell me, Harry, you say dragons. If you can't get a date, you can.
I think I'll take the dragon right now.
How are you?
Spectacular.
He's dishonest whenever people care for him. He's always avoiding the real situation. That's what they mean by avoidant, because you're avoiding intimacy.
Pushing people away.
Yes.
Okay. Pushing intimacy away, pushing closeness, emotional closeness away, because they're uncomfortable with feelings.
And so that's why it's very interesting, because this is really key. We think of dismissive avoidant as like, but it's not. It's actually dismissing the other person. It's actually ignoring, creating barriers, doing all kinds of things to prevent closeness. So it's not so much about the action within itself. It's the intention of the action that we can interpret from the show itself, right? His silence when Ginny said, Harry. Okay, so let's talk about the ambivalent or anxious attachment type person. When a person that you care about comes and goes, hey, Alex, what would you react as?
Hi.
It's somebody who cares about you says hi to you.
Hi, what's up? I mean, that's normal response.
Yeah.
A very friendly tone now to welcome the person, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't recognize this, right? But this is literally how it, like dismissive, avoidant behavior is not meaning the person actually pushes you away or does anything. Dismissive avoidant behavior, or also known as avoidant in the original classic terms, is where you are avoiding closeness or intimacy or showcasing who you really are. Can you think of people in your lives who are like this?
Oh, yeah.
How is it like trying to engage with them?
Can be frustrating.
Very frustrating.
I think I'm probably more like that also. Dismissive
I think the
avoidant.
most frustrating ones are the disorganized ones.
The fearful avoidant. We'll go through that later on also, some of the examples.
Sure.
I think my experience is that they are okay if you engage them logically, but the moment you try to talk to them about feelings, they just either ignore you or just do not interact and just not respond.
Yes.
I'm going to bring in my talent team here a little bit, right? So empathy is those who kind of feels what other people is feeling. And I'm not sure whether some of these people are dismissive or avoidant, but sometimes I get the sense that people are feeling something, but I will try to connect them or ask them if they're feeling a certain way, and then they kind of dismiss it and say no. And it creates a lot of dissonance for me. I go like, to me, it's very obvious that you're feeling this, but you're not. So I think that's kind of feeling that I get with some of them.
That's a wonderful way of describing it, right? Like you feel like, hey, wait, you're clearly angry. And then the person is like, no, I'm not angry.
In a very angry way.
I think they find it hard to acknowledge their feelings, or maybe they feel shameful when they feel a certain way.
Yeah.
So they just want to deny the feelings.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of discomfort with emotions.
I don't think it's deny because they just resist vulnerability lah. In general, they don't feel. In general, don't feel safe to share once their emotions are even pointed out.
So there's this part where I start to think that sometimes it's not even that they are denying it, but to the degree they may not even realize what they're feeling. So when you ask them and they say that they don't feel a certain way, they actually are honest about it because they're unconscious about it. So there's a part of me that's like, wow, can you stop lying to me? It's like, no, I really feel that way. So my sense is they may not even be conscious of what they're feeling for people who are avoidant. So when they say they don't feel a certain way, they believe with all their heart they don't feel a certain way, even though they probably suppress it or repress it.
That's actually dismissive avoidant thought process, in my opinion. So most of the people who I know who are dismissive avoidant happen to be like this. So whenever you actually try to connect with their feelings, they cannot connect. So
Okay.
yeah.
Please continue.
No. So I just wanted to like re-emphasize, right? They are not dismissive because they're intentionally dismissive.
Yep.
They have inability to connect.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's entirely kind of subconscious, right? It's a automatic thought process.
Yeah, automatic is habitual.
Yeah. To the degree that they're no longer conscious of it. So that's why one of the things that that was important for people who are dismissive avoidant or just avoidant is to start to be comfortable with their own feelings so they can acknowledge it, so that they can deal with it, and therefore deal with that same feeling with other people. So I thought that was interesting, right? But until they stop to create that space, they're not going to be conscious of it.
Yep. So hi Melody.
Hi Melody, good to see you again.
Yeah, so we were talking about dismissive avoidant, and I was just showing the video of Harry Potter and the way he dismisses emotions and how people question him.
Okay, can I jump in at this point?
Great, jump in.
Respond to something you said just now earlier. You said that you found a lot of examples of avoidant types in your YouTube exploration, right?
Yes.
Putting on my writer's hat, because I'm intimately familiar with character development. Why do writers write avoidant personality types as opposed to others? Okay, secure people, right? The healthy secure ones are boring.
Yes.
They don't as characters, as movie characters, they're boring because they don't have a lack, they don't have a flaw. So they don't have a sort of a what you call a character arc. So the character can.
There's no growth in the person because the person is too perfect.
There's no growth, right? That's why Superman is a really difficult character for writers to tackle because he's already perfect. He doesn't have any flaws. It's very hard to write a character arc for a character like Superman. Okay.
That's why they created Smallville.
Sorry?
That's why they created Smallville.
Yeah.
Young Superman. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, the anxious ones, right? You have them in movies, but then they don't make good lead characters.
Yeah, no, not good lead characters. Yes.
Yeah, because of their anxiety and it's hard to see them in a lead take charge kind of situation.
But if you think about it, I think they do have secure characters, right? The secure characters are usually the gurus. It's like your
your mentor characters.
Yeah, your mentor characters, right? Like I was going to say Obi-Wan. It's not Obi-Wan. What's the Yoda? She's like the Yoda, right? The
Yoda and the Obi-Wan. The mentor characters, the mentor archetypes.
Yeah.
But they don't make good lead characters. They can make good sort of helper, mentor type characters. Okay, the disorganized ones also don't make good lead characters.
They make good villains.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about status. Okay, because I came across this in one of the character development books. So a good hero, right? A good heroic character or a good lead character in the movie carries himself or herself with a high status. You see, that's where the avoidant comes in, because avoidant people carry themselves with high status.
Yes. So that means they're high and proud and they're like completely.
They see themselves as independent, right? Like
they generally have a seemingly positive view of themselves and a negative view of others. That's your avoidant, right?
Yeah. Yes. All right. The belief. Remember we had the two.
Yes. I remember a chart. That's a very good chart.
So yeah, I think it fits that very well.
Yeah. So high regard for self, low regard for others, therefore their behavior. And media. Okay. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? So is there a chance that the avoidant character is narcissistic? Because narcissistic people have high regards for themselves and low regard for others.
So just to be very specific about the way we look at things, high regard for self, when it comes to a narcissistic person, is very interesting. High regards for the image of self, not a high regards for actual self. Just want to separate a little bit of difference here. So they think they are this person, but if they see their real self, they will hate themselves. Most narcissists are like this. To be very specific about the term narcissism, because narcissism, as the story comes about, Narcissus was more in love with the reflection than himself. Whereas anxious type, this avoidant, dismissive avoidant type, it's talking about behaviors in reaction to people that cares for them. So when they could be narcissistic, they could also be antisocial, they could also be borderline, they could also be a few other things.
Psychopath.
Yeah, but they're usually a cluster B profile. Yes, cluster B profile. In personality disorders, we cluster it as type B, cluster B. So in personality disorders, we call it aliens, bitches, and bastards. And sorry, we're saying this. Yeah, but this is our medical term. And crybabies. So crybabies are the anxious emotional attachment type. The Bs are the dismissive avoidant, and then the aliens are the disorganized.
Yeah, could there also be a chance that you show two kinds of attachment? Like, cause is it like a spectrum thing? So you can be secure and. I actually did the test, but then like on one time I took the test, I was secure attachment, and the next time I took the test, I was anxious. So I wasn't sure like, is this the same test that I'm doing? Is it like a chance that it could be on a spectrum, like you know how we do our INTJ thing, right? So you have like
you might lean towards anxious, but you might function with security. So I would say, like for example, I'm anxious attachment type. By upbringing, I've trained myself and practiced enough to become secure enough. Secure enough for me.
Okay, let me just jump in quickly here. Because I came across this, when you're a baby, right? When we were babies, we can say that, we are one type of attachment style. But after we become adults, with adults, we then have this thing called this adult attachment. With adult attachment, we have actually developed multiple attachment styles, and this comes out when we're with different people. So that's what Ethan said, right? In different situations, the different sort of attachment styles tend to show up in different contexts. So if you're doing the quiz in different contexts, then you might get different results.
Okay, that explains it. Thanks.
Or with different people, right?
Yeah. So again, the other funny thing that I do all tests with, I do all tests with my instinct. I never do it with my logic. So this is also a habit that I do whenever I do any personality test or any profiling tools. So this is what I did with emergenetics recently with Jeffers. So what happened was that I was doing my instinctive response, what I have a tendency to do. So from childhood, my first thought process in which I do this. So I'm an anxious attachment style, but I've learned to be secure. I still have anxious thoughts in my head, but I've learned to be secure by managing them. So then it becomes, because I fear abandonment, I fear certain things, I would behave in a certain manner, but my thoughts never stop catastrophizing. I literally still catastrophize, but I manage it a lot better, and I'm like, okay, I catastrophize. That's cool.
You just have better coping mechanisms, right?
I'm not even attached to the attachment anymore. So like I might catastrophize and go, is that so bad? Okay, I end up in a argument with the person. Like recently, I was talking to somebody who I thought was a very cool person, but I felt lack of connection with him. So there's a little bit of anxious attachment elements within this. Just a friend, right? But then the lack of connection made me go like, wait, what's wrong? Wait, what's this? And I just had a conversation with him. And then he went, no, we're happily, I feel very connected. I feel like we're actually in line. I'm just like this because it's the specific type. He feels connected. I don't, because behavioral wise, we differ. But we are able to secure an attachment in the relationship by communicating. Yeah, but it's too easy for us to be good friends like Alex because we're both anxious types. So it's
Why not? Why can't two anxious types be?
No, because it's very easy for us to be friends. I'm just laughing because it's so much easier because you can read each other very well.
Oh, okay.
It's not a problem. Like sometimes with Jeffers, I don't know whether I'm connecting with him, and then I realize, wait, no. His version of connection, because Jeffers said a wonderful statement in the chat, because none of you on the live stream can see this. Someone who has dismissive avoidant attachment style often sees themselves as independent and able to go it alone. They often maintain strict boundaries, can be emotionally distant, and have a hard time opening up to their partners or keeping close friends. So because he said something like he can recognize that he starts from probably dismissive avoidance style, right, Jeffers?
Yep.
So I have difficulty knowing whether I'm connected with him.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Because you can never tell because I hardly reveal my emotions also.
Yes.
Alex, you might be able to pick that up because maybe empathy lah, even from my facial expression.
Individualization, right?
Yeah, and individualization. Yeah.
I find that I could connect with Jeffers quite a bit. Yeah, you have that too. So I kind of know where he's going, and sometimes the coach hat comes on, right? Now I end up challenging him in certain things lah, and I think Jeffers is very familiar with that.
No, I think because my old style with my anxious attachment style used to be to save the other person. So if the person is dismissive avoidant, if they dismiss and avoid me, I feel completely helpless. Then I feel the lack of connection. So now that also I've changed some of my habits, I still don't know how to reconnect. I don't know how to make the feeling happen again.
Interesting.
It's a feeling thing. It's a logic thing. It's versus a logic thing, right? I know I'm well connected with Jeffers. We had a great session the last round where we had a discussion about emergenetics. I have fun talking to him. Great times. However, it doesn't feel as easy as with you, Alex.
I see.
Does this make sense?
Okay.
Pat yourself on the back, like Alex.
Yeah. My boss used to do that. Alex, you're so good. Good job. Give yourself a pat on the head. Okay, so I think one of the things that's interesting about attachment styles is this, right? People with the ambivalent one versus avoidant one, if they come together, the ambivalent one would feel like rejected by the avoidant one, right? So they'll try harder. And when they try harder, the avoidant one will feel more pressure because the person is trying to get into that space, right? And then they'll avoid even harder. So there's this dance of the ambivalent one trying harder and the avoidant one moving further. So it's kind of eventually can spiral to kingdom come.
Therefore, it is about communication. Therefore, Melody went #communication. It's the only way to get past all these tendencies. I've never met a person who's truly secure without communication. I feel like all of us have certain amount of anxiety, ambivalence, or a certain amount of avoidance, a certain amount of this and that, because there will be parts of ourselves that we are not feeling completely connected with or suddenly feel anxiety about. But communication is the only way to really get past it.
Yeah, so I think regardless of your attachment styles, you will communicate, right? It's just how do you communicate? So a secure attachment style is comfortable with fear and anger. They can confront it, right? They are okay with the other person being angry. They can talk about it, and it's okay. It's normal for someone with secure attachment. You do that with someone with ambivalence. It's like, oh my God, did I do something wrong? Why are you so angry? And start to get fearful, then try to make up for it and things like that. So the other thing about, I'm not sure whether this one falls under ambivalent or avoidant, maybe both. They can get a bit passive aggressive, right? Because
both.
Probably both, right? So the ambivalent one, which starts to feel a bit hurt because the person, like sometimes myself, feels rejected, it comes out in my language. I become more sarcastic. That's my peg role, right? I become more sarcastic to the person. And the person like, what's up? And it's like, that time you did this, like, what? So
yeah, everybody can hear your tone when you get sarcastic. It's like that one law.
Yeah, no, there's okay. There are different types of sarcasm that comes from me. So I think the communication is there, but how we communicate is also informed by our attachment styles, which actually creates our triggers. Right. So the ambivalent one, I speak for myself, is when I get triggered, I feel lack of appreciation, I feel rejected or whatever it is, or unappreciated. Then the pegro part of me comes out that I need to consciously manage. I'm not sure about avoidant lah. What does avoidant do?
Dismissive avoidant. Come, let's ask Jeffeth.
Run away.
Yeah, we usually avoid lah. We don't talk about.
I need my own space.
Yeah, we need my own space. Don't intrude my space. So that's why boundaries are setting strict boundaries of what you can talk about is important. Even we tend to respond very neutral as well.
That's because you have harmony.
That's because I what?
No, you have harmony, right? No,
I've also I've also harmony, but when I talk about neutral, is I'll go back to language that hardly express my emotions. Also, it's just very just very
So the thing
neutral
is like
statements. Yes, like this is it, or or just
statements.
So
not
are you
opinions.
conflict avoidance also? Then
They're all conflict avoidant, right? Because only secure goes deals with conflicts directly.
Yeah, tend to dislike conflict, definitely. Of course, prefer not to lah. But that's also because harmony lah. But there could be a correlation there lah. Harmony as well as dismissive avoidance.
Yeah, I'm actually very curious about Paylin because she said that she's also probably a bit dismissive avoidant.
I really am not sure lah, but I think depending on how close the person is, I think could be. I think if I'm in a close relationship with a dismissive avoidant, then I become an anxious, ambivalent.
So it depends on the person that is.
I think it can be triggered depending on the other person. But if let's say I have another close friend who is a little bit more, I think, secure, then we are okay. So I think it can be triggered depending who the other party is.
What if the person is super clingy?
Wow.
Your reaction.
I get a little bit uncomfortable and I would withdraw a bit by bit. Yeah. That's a bit strange for somebody who has got Wu as number one.
Yeah. Yeah, because Wu is number one is like you're supposed to be the anxious or ambivalent attachment style.
Maybe I'm supposed to winning others over. So maybe I'm more used to doing the chasing.
Who sounds pretty secure to me?
You know, when we talk about things like, oh, what if a person is super clingy and all this, right? I think it becomes very subjective because what's super clingy to you might not be super clingy to her as well, right?
Yeah, Paylin, what is super clingy to you?
Let's say, for example, if a person that I feel neutral about starts to text me at night and I didn't respond, and the next morning I receive another text, it's to me like a bit over. Yeah.
So that actually sounds a little bit dismissive.
What if it's someone close?
But I'm neutral to the person, you see. I'm not like, it's such a neutral party. So I thought the person would give me space to respond.
Space.
Sorry.
More for people who are important and close to you or significant people, right? So what if it was someone that was significant to you who is more clingy to you? How will you respond?
I will try to respond to the need law.
No, hear her discomfort when she said that. I will try to respond to the need law. Like versus, her usual voice, right? It's very different.
Oh, is it? So I'm really like seeing it as a... Okay, so maybe I'm a bit dismissive about it.
I mean, the biggest test you can tell is you just think about somebody who's very close you work with, like, or at least my wife, right? So if I relate it back to, do I share a lot of my emotions to my wife? I don't actually. It was more deliberate if by the time I share, usually it means it bubble up to a point whereby, I really need to share. But in most cases, I will tend to listen to her lah, more than myself will come and share, right? Then I'll usually give a very objective opinion. Probably also due to like, I just didn't feel like there's a need to share. More like that, like they say, like go it alone, right? Don't really depend on others, right? You can kind of do it yourself, kind of strive it. Until like what Ethan has mentioned, right? You still need to deliberately find ways to cope because it's not healthy as a long term lah. I've never seen somebody who self-cope without expressing his emotion could go very long term lah. So if eventually you need to find somebody, hey, actually I'm not really doing that well, then maybe it's time to share lah. So I would do that with my wife also. But it's probably not as frequent. Like every day I need to sit you down, let's talk about how I feel about the day, that kind of thing. I won't be that comfortable to do that anyway.
Okay. Empathy was like, I need to talk about emotions. But here's the interesting thing, right? Is a dismissive, avoidant person a good listener?
They can look like one. The question is what you define as a good listener also.
So I was thinking that, so Jeffers said that, I tend to listen more. But my experience with Jeffers is that he's a good listener, right? He can identify issues, he can identify emotions, he's able to name and relate to what a person's feeling. But in general, if a person is highly avoidant and therefore not very connected with how they feel, it's very hard for them to be good listeners, I think.
I think here comes the difference, right? Jeffers doesn't connect, from my experience, doesn't connect by showing emotion back to you. He connects by understanding, interpreting the information and sending it back to you, right? That's what I noticed for me.
So it's more like a cognitive empathy. Logically, he can understand what you're saying.
Versus Alex who goes, oh, you poor thing.
Do I do that?
Yes.
Alex is more nurturing, is it? That means.
Empathy.
In a way, yes, I do feel it. But I won't let myself feel it to let it take over. In a sense, like take over. Like I sort of feel because I could relate to enough to listen. Right, but I wouldn't be like, oh, that must be really painful, Ethan. To me, it's just okay. Level 2 painful. That's it. I know what you feel like. Now let's. Yeah, it won't be like I need to feel level 8 pain, right? So to feel you, right?
Well, Jeff can be very animated also, right? When you talk
say
about
that again, actually.
That's right.
Can you just say that again?
Oh, me?
Jeffers.
Oh no, so I was saying like I can relate to Alex or Ethan just by, so I still feel emotions as they're talking about their stories or their predicament, but I just don't need to feel like a level 8 kind of emotion they feel lah. Once I feel like, oh, that's roughly how they feel, I know how to respond. So I'll go back to neutral lah. So I feel a bit, I'll go back to neutral. That's my pattern lah.
Whereas Alex, what do you do?
Oh, sayang.
Yeah. Alex would be like, oh, I'm here with you.
Wow, so nice.
Hands on shoulder.
It was a bit awkward when Jeffers said it. I can sense it.
You can sense it?
Sorry, sense what?
It's like I don't know, just not very natural. Like the way he was trying to imitate you. It was a bit.
Level 8. Oh, so much pain. I cannot.
No, the other one where he was like, oh, what?
Oh, you poor thing. Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, poor thing. I just can't do that.
And you can't, when you say it, you feel uncomfortable as well, right?
Yeah, I just feel that's not me lah. So after I realized, and then previously you talked about vulnerability, right, and authenticity, right? I just don't need to be that law.
See his facial expression as he says that. Doesn't mean he's not secure. It's just that he probably came from dismissive avoidance style, and chose, because that's his natural tendency when probably growing up. He found his way to be more secure along the way, but this is his habit. Doesn't mean it defines his way of dealing with attachment. He can still have very healthy relationships, but not in the format in which is like Alex?
I think it's just different way of expressing, right? So I tend to be a little bit more animated, not as animated as you because you are third
expressiveness.
Right? Okay, we're talking about
What's that?
We're talking about imagenetics. That's
Right.
another profiling tool that
Okay.
Ethan just did with me. So yeah, we found him very animated.
So third expressiveness, if I remember the correct label that was there in the report, right, it was gregarious.
Gregarious, not gregarious. See me, what gregarious? What term is that?
I feel English, okay, I feel. So gregarious, right? I'm like in the middle, almost first third. So he's the super animated one. I'm a little bit more expressive.
In between, yeah.
But actually, Jeffrey, you're first third, huh?
I'm first third, yes, expressiveness, yes.
Okay.
So the natural behavior people will give me feedback is like, oh, you look very calm and composed. Because yeah, you're just very mild, you're just very calm. But internally doesn't mean calm, internally might be like, oh shit, this is happening. But on what is happening outside, people will see me as like, oh, very introspective.
This is my profile.
Yeah, gregarious.
91.
Wow.
Assertiveness, forceful.
Right.
Flexibility, welcomes change.
Hey, actually, thankfully, you have this gregarious thing going on, right? Otherwise, you can be quite aggressive. So there's a good balance.
And I'm flexible.
Yeah, well, his flexibility welcomes
Yes,
change. So
yes,
anybody
yes.
say anything to him, he's able to like, oh, okay.
Yeah, but
And
I'm
you're
so
not
bad. I'm look at my structural. This is like hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, if you're so flexible, then how can you be so not structural then?
He's so flexible that he's not structured.
Okay, that's interesting.
That's why Alex always has to like paint the mural board.
Yeah. He talks and then I put it down in
some structure.
Okay, let me continue with the videos. So this is anxious preoccupied, which also known as ambivalent.
I didn't.
Right.
What? Don't leave.
Did you follow me?
I feel very protective of you.
How did you get in here?
The window?
Do you do that a lot?
Just the past couple of months.
Edward?
Okay, how scary is that? Anybody who actually watched Twilight, the movies?
I did, but I can't really remember.
Does anybody actually like the character? Do you actually like this kind of guys?
I like the girl.
You like the girl? Okay. So, like, I find it very interesting. There are people who actually really like what this guy does. Almost stalkerish level. It seems like everybody here is like a little bit like, what the hell? Like that is anxious, preoccupied to pretty much the next level of stalkerish kind of feeling. That's the most extreme version of this. Can anybody relate to dealing with people on this level? Anybody here who had a stalker before? Melody, you want to share your story of a stalker? Or Melissa?
No, I don't have an experience, but I was just wondering what are the other qualities of anxious preoccupied other than stalker?
Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys. So Woody from Toy Story is also viewed as anxious preoccupied attachment style. Let me just show you guys. Wait, sorry.
Stay away from Andy. He's mine, and no one is taking him away from me.
I'm Ron, by the way. Ron Weasley. I want someone who's going to be with me until the end. I'm
someone who deserves me and not some screwed up, insecure guy who can't deal with a woman who's got her act together. Now, I'm gonna end up deliriously happy, and Big is gonna die old and alone, and I pity him. Really, I pity him.
So these are pretty extreme versions of, I mean, not really extreme if you look at it. Some of it is quite common. Possessive people are anxious, preoccupied. Protective people, tiger mums are classic anxious, preoccupied. Helicopter parents, anxious, preoccupied.
Protective can be secure as well, right?
Depends. The way that Edward was doing it in Twilight, no, that's stalker. But define protective. Like, what is protective to you?
I like the way Superman is protective over, innocent people.
Justice? That feels like justice. Is that what you're referring to? Protective over innocent people. I don't hear that as attachment style. Faith, are you talking? Okay.
Just thinking out loud. I mean, that is more of having a justice in them to exercise, like Ethan mentioned. It's not really a attachment style.
Yeah, because attachment style is usually with people who are close to you, more than just the general people who are nice or good.
Yeah, so if Superman, then you're probably talking about his relationship with Lois Lane.
Yes.
And,
or Martha. His mom lah.
What about Buddha? Right, Buddha is like,
talking about Gautama, right?
Yeah, sort of universal love, kind of that, just loves everybody.
There's a difference between anxious, preoccupied, where you're always thinking about the thing, versus I love you and take care of you and cherish you. And
which is why I bring out the difference, because the kind of big generous love, I think, is more secure than anxious or ambivalent.
The big love is momentary, cherish, move on. Anxious, preoccupied is I cannot stop thinking about you.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So So I agree with you on this side. Yeah.
Melody is talking. Okay.
Any other thoughts? I mean, Ron Weasley, the way he every time scary comes out, he grabs the person next to him, or whatever. He's always worried and then grabbing somebody close to him. He's always checking in on somebody else next to him. He's actually the classic anxious, preoccupied type, in a slightly healthier way. Slightly. Okay, so throughout the whole Harry Potter series, you start seeing Ron being a little bit dependent on other people. Okay, quite dependent.
Right.
What's the name of the character from Scooby-Doo?
Shaggy or
Shaggy.
Yeah, Shaggy is completely attached to Scooby-Doo. Okay, great. Jeffers actually went to get the quote. Preoccupied anxious attachment indicates a sense of unworthiness or unlovability combined with a positive evaluation of others. So I don't deserve the love that you are giving to me. So they're always trying to get other people to love them. So this combination of characteristics will lead to the person to strive for self-acceptance by gaining the acceptance of value or value others, also known as anxious type. Right? Our dear, my fellow anxious type friend here with me, Alex.
I'm reading the characteristics and traits, which is quite interesting. You should read that out too.
Yeah, okay. Characteristics and traits of people with a preoccupied or anxious attachment style are overly invested or involved in close relationships. Sounds familiar? Dependent on others for self-worth. Sounds familiar? Demanding, needy approach towards others. I completely showed all these symptoms when I was younger. Have a negative model of self and a positive model of others. Me too. High anxiety and low avoidance in relationship. So how many of you here are anxious, avoidant, anxious, preoccupied type?
So many. Definitely doesn't sound like me, this one. I cannot connect.
I've actually gone through phases.
Oh.
I've gone through an anxious phase.
And what was it like for you to go through the anxious phase?
Clingy, needy, kind of like don't really have a good relationship with myself. A lot of insecurity.
I think it's good that we're having this discussion, right? Like it's so important for us to have a healthy self-esteem.
Yeah.
And be honest with ourselves when we don't actually have a healthy self-esteem. Yes, Melissa?
So question, how do we heal this anxious, preoccupied attachment style? Or how do we like overcome this?
I think the standard answer is to look for secure attachment figures. Meaning people that when you hang around with them, you feel happy, you feel secure, you feel good about yourself, and then that tends to rub off on you. So that's why with adult attachment, right? We tend to have we can develop multiple kind of attachment styles because depending on the kind of attachment figures that we have in our lives, that's where we get our sort of positive influence from. Attachment figures are people who make us feel happy and secure.
Yeah. I think this is where it's very interesting, right? So having the right people to show you what love feels like.
Yeah. What some people call a relationship template or a love map.
Yeah.
So my experience with that is, I think also learning about how to value and love yourself more is an important part. I think for people who are anxious, ambivalent, we tend to do a lot of things for other people, but not for ourselves.
Yes.
Right. So you do a lot of things because you want to care for the person, you try to protect, you try to keep, and things like that, right? For the other person. So we do a lot of things for other people. But if you look back, at least for myself, I look back and say, actually, I don't do a lot of these things for myself. And I wonder why. And
we are waiting for somebody else to do it for us.
Yeah, so that we can receive that same attachment or love from the other person, right? So one of the things that I've learned is that how can I focus on more self-love and also doing more things for myself, right? And that actually helps us to become healthier and therefore less anxious for the relationships with other people. And I think that's an important part of our own personal growth. And I don't know about other people. Like for me, I come at kind of move with in and out of it. There are times that I'm just very good at self-care, and other times I just get more and more anxious. I focus more on other people and forget about myself. And then I have to pull myself back to realize that, hey, I need to have more self-care, right? Go out. I don't always need to do things with other people. I can do things and have quality time with myself, like quiet time, and learning to cultivate that relationship with myself. It sounds a bit weird, I don't know, for some people, but that relationship with myself, that healthy caring for myself, loving myself is actually a big part of how I, put myself in the state whereby I'm more secure in my relationships with other people.
So quite interesting because as we're talking about this, we're also talking about close relationships, right? And I could relate to it because it felt like my wife is more towards this preoccupied, anxious attachment. So a view of others is always great, right? As help others, go all out. But there are times that she'll just view herself like, hey, am I really that good enough? So there's a bit of a negative view. Whereas as a dismissive avoidant, I tend to flip. Right, I'll see myself like, okay, I'm capable, I can do it myself. But my view of others might be like, can't really depend on that person. So I depend on myself. And I think because we are in a close relationship with my wife, we do exchange. And sometimes I wonder like, hey, how come your view is always about helping others, gifting others, just lend your hand to support? And just by her showing that perspective, I realized, hey, actually that's my own blind spot, right? And it's the things I naturally don't think about, right? I tend to be more reserved. Then sometimes when she also need encouragement, right? Because she depend on other people to sometimes validate herself. and sometimes she'll come back from her work like, oh yeah, whatever the person said to her, does it mean it's part of a fault? And then when we had that conversation, I had to tell her, hey, it's not really part of your fault lah. Some of the setting boundaries, right, as part of dismissive avoidance, right. And this some of part is part of a responsibility, some of part is yours lah. But if you take on the responsibility of others people, then of course you will feel all the guilt on you. So I think that kind of thing really allows us to learn from one another, because that's what makes us different lah. So I think I don't know whether there's a way to cope, but I think the nature of close relationships would help us to learn lah. So that's just a point to add. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeffers. I just want to expand from where he is, right? Where you just talked about, right? Learning from other people is really key in developing your own attachment style. That's
learning to relate to other people with different attachment styles, or to make yourself healthier.
Yes, that also can work.
No, I'm anxious, avoidant, but I actually don't like to rely on people. Like, I like to give, but I don't like to receive. I like to help people, but I don't like to be helped. Yeah, it's not here, not there.
That's actually probably a little bit different. Let me go into the because what happens is that there is the fearful avoidant type. I find it funny because in Harry Potter, they actually say that Hermione Granger is a secure attachment type. Let's just see the video. Because, okay, let's just look up secure first, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the...
Harry, no way. You heard what Madam Hoop said. Besides, you don't even know how to fly. What an idiot. Now, if you two don't mind, I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed. Or worse, expelled.
You might not have my name.
Anybody who watches Game of Thrones?
I haven't played with dolls since I was 8. May I be excused?
Oh, you've barely eaten a thing.
It's all right. Go on. War was easier than daughters.
I don't know what exactly they feel as secure, but but because a lot of these elements they're talking about is communication or over communication. In fact, it seems like over communication is the one that really gets past a lot of these issues when it comes to communication. What is really interesting is there's this other one called fearful avoidant type. So I want to show another clip that talks about fearful avoidant. This is another YouTube channel that talks a lot about this. Wait, let me just pull it out. Anybody who watches this channel called Psych2Go, it's actually really not bad.
People to breathe and be themselves in any relationship, people with a dismissive avoidant attachment style can seek it more frequently to push themselves away from being vulnerable with their partner. If at any point their partner...
Yeah.
But extreme independence is an illusion.
That's dismissive avoidant for people.
Because humans need connection in order to survive. As a result, people with an avoidant, dismissive attachment style have very few close relationships with others. Number 4, fearful avoidant. People with a fearful avoidant attachment style experience a delicate mixture, fearing being both too close or too distant from their lover. They can be unpredictable and are often overwhelmed by their own emotions. They understand they have to approach others in order to find love, but when people get too close to them, they often hurt them. They fear being abandoned, but struggle with being confident in their partner and relying on them. They face a lot of inner conflict between wanting intimacy and resisting it. As a result, they usually experience many highs and lows in relationships, cling to their partners when they feel rejected, and if not careful, can end up in abusive relationships. Similar to the dismissive avoidant attachment style, these individuals have very few close relationships with others. Accepting what your attachment style is and
Yeah, so they were talking a lot about this, right? Where you're both. There are people who, I mean, everybody is on the spectrum of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But the most extreme version is where when the person treats you badly, you become anxious. And then when the person treats you well, suddenly you go, no. That is actually fearful avoidant. So when we talk about this, 忽冷忽热, the Chinese saying.
Yeah, one foot on the gas pedal, one foot on the brake.
Yep. So a person who is fearful avoidant, thank you, Jefford. You're always you and your input.
Yes, love your input.
Yeah, a person who has a fearful avoidant attachment style is conducting a balancing act. These people have a fear of abandonment, so they might give off mixed signals, pushing the partner away and then later putting them back in.
Yeah, blowing hot and cold.
Yes, blowing hot and cold. For fear of they have also a few close friendships for fear of losing them and ending up alone.
So let me come back to Faith's comment about wanting to help other people but not wanting people to help, or not feeling comfortable. I think that can also stem from ambivalent, right? Because ambivalent is more of
I'm not good enough.
I'm not good enough to be helped, or you don't think that people should, well, I mean, to put it bluntly, waste time on helping you or do things.
No. It's more of that I grew up to be quite independent, so that's why to me it's like if needing help shows that I am, not being able to do things by myself. So that's the reason why I don't really want to accept help. It's not about being afraid. But I have the mental that everybody has their own problems, their own burdens, so I don't want to add to their burdens by telling them my problems. That's
very type 2. I mean, sorry, we jump from profile to profile.
Enneagram.
Yeah. Enneagram, I'm type 2. I did it 2 years.
That's why
the answer is the same.
Okay. I'm type 2 too. That's why I can relate to what you just said. And that's exactly type 2, right? And if you read the type 2 description, type 2 has a problem of not recognizing our own needs. So you go back to the Enneagram profile and read about it. So when I read it, I go like, oh crap. It made me depressed for a while when I read my Enneagram profile. But it makes sense because I think it's a little bit ambivalent, whereby we don't recognize our own needs and accept that needs from other people. And interestingly, even before I did Enneagram, I had friends coming to me, right? A friend who gave me a book, Habitudes. And then she asked me to read this chapter called The Starving Baker, which was quite interesting, right? So it's about the person who is baking, feeds everybody, but he's himself starving. Sounds very much like type 2. So I think the type 2 is, and at least for me, right, I can see the relationship between the type 2 not wanting help with the ambivalence. And then that's the way I see it's connecting, right? And since you have done type 2 Enneagram before, then I'm sure you can also relate to some degree the part about wanting to help other people, but at the same time also not wanting to receive help because sometimes not even seeing the need. And the interesting thing about Enneagram is, so Enneagram based on like almost like 7 sins, right? So the sin of type 2 is pride, which is interesting.
True, that's true.
Because you're the savior for everybody else. Whereas I'm type 7, right? So that's why I'm third for everything. So, but anyway, so that's okay. If you look at it, right? Like if you look at the hot cold thing, okay, I'll be honest, my relationships were mostly with this type of people, my old relationships. So my romantic relationships, the 忽冷忽热, the fearful avoidant type. So when you ignore them, they will be super like trying really hard to get your attention. When you treat them well, they start taking you for granted.
they run away from you when you start treating them well. I came across something which I read. The disorganized or the fearful avoidant type is the type that struggles the most among all the different attachment styles. Because what differentiates this from the others is that all the others have a stable way of dealing with the world. The disorganized or the fearful avoidant, they don't have a stable way of managing relationships. So they keep flitting between the other two insecure attachment styles.
Yeah, and if you think about the quadrant, right? The disorganized or the fearful avoidant, the belief about self is that they're not worthy of love. Their belief about other people is people are incapable of loving them.
Yeah.
So if you hold these two kind of beliefs at the same time, it's I mean, it's quite terrible.
Yep. So if you look at it, right, like, so that's why I wanted the videos and everything, because I started recognizing that, like, last week where we were doing, I mean, not 2 weeks ago, where we were doing it, right, like, I could tell that people were wondering what it looked like, because everybody's like, what does it look like, right? So today the whole goal of the session was to be able to go, this is what it looks like. It's not exactly what it is, but this is as close as we can get to showing you what it looks like. You can see and relate it to people you know. And I think this is where it's really important, because actually admitting to your own attachment style helps a lot in creating better relationships with people. Because it's really interesting, because I starting to realize that when you want to have, it's either you find a person who's secure, or you find a person who's opposite of you, but communicates. That's what I realized for me has worked very well. It's like, for example, if I hang out more with Jeffers, or my business partner, James, is a classic avoidant type. You show him a lot of affection, he was like, right? So what happens is that, and he doesn't really talk about his emotions or this kind of stuff. So this is where it really matters for me. And that's what I realized also. It's like, when you actually work with somebody who's on the opposite side, it actually also helps you, provided both sides are willing to communicate. And I think that's what's really important here.
And I think communication, it's not just about communication, right? It's also the willingness to admit where you are.
Yes.
So if you are ambivalent and you have certain fear and you react in certain ways, it can be scary to be vulnerable, to admit where you are, right? You know, when you say like that, you know, I fear that I might lose the relationship, or whatever it is. Right? So the ability to recognize it and then articulate it, I think that is the important part of the communication, right?
Yes.
So maybe I'll just ask a question. Ethan or Alex can answer. I'll expand on what Melissa initially asked, right? Is it on a spectrum, right? And that question is more related to, let's say a person suddenly face a crisis who is like this initially dismissive avoidant, correct? So view of self is okay, but view of others incapable of loving them is maybe not that high in that sense. But let's say suddenly that person go through a crisis, lose the job, suddenly he start to get very dejected and starts to have different beliefs about himself along the way as a result of that crisis. Does that shift them to like a fearful avoidance, or that's not possible? So just want to hear your views on that.
Alex, you want to start first?
I'm trying to understand the question.
Does a person change that? Okay, so like a lot of the even StrengthsFinder, right? According to StrengthsFinder, you don't change your personality or your strengths that much unless you go through a very traumatic experience.
Yeah.
Right? The same thing in attachment styles. Is that gonna be the case? Is it through a traumatic experience that you actually learn to change, that you will change your attachment style?
Yeah, generally that's what my readings have been telling me. Attachment styles do tend to be rather stable over time, and I think that trauma and bad experiences, really really bad experiences, can change it to can shift you to one of the insecure types, and I think it takes a lot of work to get to the secure attachment style. What is called the earned secure style. What Alex said just now about the relationship with the self, that resonates with me a great deal. Because to me, the relationship with the self is the most primary of all relationships. And it is the sort of window through which we understand or we have relationships with everybody else. All other relationships are based on that relationship with the self.
Very cool. Alex?
I think for me, I think it can change because end of the day, if you look at it, it's all based on the belief, right? The belief of yourself and the belief of other people. And I think, if someone's significance is very much attached to their career, right? And then they lose their career. Okay? Could that potentially shift the way they relate to people? I don't know, maybe. I'm thinking because maybe that person's sense of self-worth or belief that the person is worthy is attached to their career, right? And then now they no longer have career. Then what now? Does it mean that they are no longer worthy of being cared for and loved? Then that could potentially change the way they relate to people. I suspect. So if we look at people who maybe lose their jobs suddenly, furloughed, or people who retired, right? I think we do see some changes, right?
Yeah, I think I've read somewhere that somebody did a study of all the life stresses and found that among all the most stressful periods of time in a person's life, right? For example, losing a loved one, versus losing a job. Losing a job actually is more stressful than losing a loved one. Apparently, it's that stressful. So, what Alex, you said about whether or not when the person is very attached to his or her career and then suddenly losing the job, whether or not that is stressful, I'm pretty convinced that it is extremely stressful. And I think it could possibly have some bearing on the person's attachment style. I have a friend who about 5 years ago decided that he got retrenched, and he decided that he's got a portfolio of stocks and shares, and he decided that the dividends from his portfolio just about meets his living expenses. So he decided not to get a new job. And then he would just, do what he wants. I can tell you that after that point, right, this friend of mine became so avoidant, and he just became really, really unpleasant to be with. He's going around making nasty remarks to other people. He's losing friends like nobody's business. He was avoidant before, but after the job thing, it was much, much, much worse. So just to give you an idea of how much that sort of has a bearing on the person's attachment style.
Yes. Okay. So if I may extend, right? So if I look at the world and I look at all these kind of different things, the basis in which I look at everybody is according to their attachment to the idea of who they are, what they are, identity.
Or self-concept.
Yeah, the self-concept, the ego, right? For the lack of the better description. Your relationship with the ego and how the ego relates to the outside world is what defines your attachment style, in my opinion. Meaning, how attached are you to your ego in the first place? The only way you can create a secure attachment style is having not being too attached to whatever your ego is. Am I better than other people? I don't care. Am I worse than other people? I don't care. I'm happy being me. For example, will completely change the way you deal with relationships.
What's an ego? What do you define ego?
Okay. Ego is self-concept, right? So let me define this in a very very specific way. My perceived idea of who I am. So for example, when you ask a person what is he, what are they, Most people use their jobs as their reference point. I don't use my job as a reference point because I'm self-employed and I don't really quite care, right? But that's the other part. The reason why I became self-employed is because I never attached myself to any of these labels. So when somebody who wanted to join me started going, I want to be in CEO position, my first reaction is this person is too attached to the idea of being a CEO without having anybody to control under him, right? So that's one of the things that I found very interesting. I have no attachment to the term CEO. He has 100% attachment to the term CEO and being labeled as so to hold it around. That's ego. Whatever you label me, whatever I label myself, has no longer played a major role in my life. Why? Because I'm still trying to figure out what new things I'm going to learn about myself. What new things do I want to learn about myself, right? So that is a detachment from ego. That's how you have secure attachment style. Because however you relate to this ego or this label that I have, doesn't matter to me.
I think there can also be healthy ego, right? So, I mean, some people label like serious ego, but there are other labels that are also important for the self-concept of ego, right? Think about your own qualities that you see yourself, maybe as a loving person or caring person and all this, right? So, I think the term ego may not always be a negative thing. It's just a way to describe your self-concept of how you see yourself and how do you describe yourself. So it can be healthy. It can be good ego.
So for example, my ego is I am always growing and learning.
Yeah, which is fine, right? That's healthy. You're not CEO, but there is a label and attachment to it of how you describe and how do you see yourself. There is this book, I can't remember what the book was. I think it's Remaking Yourself or something. It's an NLP book. It talks about self-concept, and there are several qualities that makes a self-concept healthy. Means that it's malleable, it can be changed and receptive to feedback. So a self-concept that cannot be changed regardless of anything is not a good self-concept. Among some other things, right? So if you would like to read that book, I can find it and share with you. But there's some very, very good description of what makes a self-concept healthy.
Yep. Thank you. So that's exactly what I was referring to as well. Like, because the only way to gain secure attachment style, because we talk about relating to self, right? We actually have an image of self and an actual self. An actual self is not something observable unless you sit down and find out everything. So one of my favorite description of this is, has anybody tried to press their own arm before, like rub themselves and try to massage themselves, versus somebody else does it for you? Which one gives you a stronger feeling?
Somebody else.
Yeah. Why? Because our brain actually negates our own thoughts. Every time we have an action, our brain will negate it. So what's the chances that you actually can observe yourself? Negative, actually. Negative. Yeah. Your brain is designed to negate itself.
I got a better analogy for you, Ethan. It's like how you cannot tickle yourself.
Yes, it's true. Oh, I love that. Oh my God, I'm going to use that.
Just tickle yourself just doesn't work. But other people can tickle you.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. That's a very good one. So yes, no, actually, I had a dirtier version, but I cannot use the dirty version, so it's okay. But it's true. But that's exactly it, right? Like a lot of times we create an ego because we have to refer to something that we cannot perceive. Our brain has limitations in perceiving ourselves, and that's why we created the ego. It's a biological need. It's a biological response. It has to exist. So ego is not bad or good. It's just what is, right? So it's just how we perceive ourselves. That's why Narcissus, the original person who narcissism came from, was in love with the reflection of himself, but not himself. He was more in love with the image of himself, not who he actually was, which is why he fell into the lake where he saw his reflection, because he wanted to be with the image of himself.
That's the narcissism.
That's narcissism. The downfall is being in love with the image of self. And that's why it's very interesting, because when we look at this, right, most of the attachment styles are related to how our ego relates to other people, not how we actual people relate to other people. When I talk about this, is I am a savior of others and therefore I have to help this person. That's an attachment already. Versus I'm a growing person. I'm learning about this person. I'm learning about myself. Let's see where this goes. Let's communicate this. Yeah, and that's why for me, this session was great because we get to explore the actual behaviors, the actual thought processes. And thank you, Jeffer, for always helping us with the information dump. The information is very, very useful. And I think this is where the interesting conversation is really at. And I think because it's 9:23, it is about time for us to start having the discussion of what we've actually learned from today. And I think this is going to be quite fun. Let's start with Melody.
She's in pain.
Yeah, I am. My mind cannot comprehend many, many things. I have so much on my mind. But there's definitely things to take away. Yeah.
So what's one thing?
One thing, just one, anything.
The interaction. I'm just looking at how you guys like interacting with each other, and how how Jeff was interacting with us with his dismissive styles. Then question myself as to whether I am truly really anxious. Yeah.
That's interesting. Great. Melissa, what do you learn from this session?
I learned that the secure attachment styles never make it to the movies because they end up as boring characters. That's what I learned. And I learned that from Alex that you cannot tickle yourself.
Clearly, we're learning the most interesting things here.
Yeah.
Completely missed the topic, but okay, it's okay. all good. It's a good fun time. Okay, Palin?
I think it was a bit of an aha moment for me. I think I suddenly realized that I used to be dismissive avoidant.
Oh.
Yeah. Because I couldn't understand why that was in the past, I couldn't understand why sometimes my friends got very upset when I exit a friendship. That was really in the past. Because I thought their reaction was to me was a bit like dramatic when I felt almost nothing. I only felt guilty that they reacted that way. So yeah, so I think I was dismissive avoidant. I've also been at a stage where I was anxious, ambivalent, and then I think nowadays maybe a little bit more secure. So it seems like it's almost like a journey, you can actually change state depending on who you are with or how old you are, your growth and all that. So that's interesting for me.
Very cool.
And that actually gives some of us more hope, right? That hey, it's a journey and we can actually grow and develop and be healthy.
In fact, I think it's something worthwhile to work towards, because when you are secure, people around you get positively impacted in that sense, right? You can bring them to that state as well.
There's this quote, right? We are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with.
Very cool. Japheth?
I'll learn more about appreciating the diversity of different. That's why I can make friends with Ethan now, right? And Alex, right? Even though most of the time, sometimes I say like, why are you all overreacting? Because I never feel 8, feel 2, right? Why are you guys overreacting? That's too much. That's too much. Yeah. But yeah, coming back to the point is really understanding that we are complex, yet simple at the same time. And just know that people are different.
Very cool. JF?
My probably biggest takeaway from this evening is I picked up the new labels from you. Fearful avoidant and what was the other one? Dismissive.
Dismissive, yeah.
Yeah. I came across those terms, but I haven't taken the time to study what those are.
Cool. Thank you. What about you, Faith?
I think it's also interesting to know that there are different stages of avoidance, and it can depend on your mood when you swing unto. And I think the video really helps to press across the mind, what different styles really look like today. I mean, yeah, some of it may be very exaggerating that it wouldn't happen today, but it drives much clearer to help to identify, hey, who are you? And who are the people closest around you maybe, and then to deal with it.
Very cool. Thank you, Faith. Alex, your thoughts?
I thought it was interesting that we actually moved towards kind of what influences our attachment styles, right? So we talk about self-concept, we talk about ego, we talk about our beliefs, we talk about our attachments like our career and things like that, right? And how all these different things affects our attachment styles. And I thought that actually what that can lead to would be, hey, how now that we understand a little bit about what the gears are, right, that influences our attachment styles, is now how do we move it, right? So we talked a little bit about relationship with ourselves, the self-concept thing. So I think as we start to become more aware of what these different components are, the more we can start to influence it so we can get healthier and get better. I mean, not to say that all of us, I mean, in some way we're all a bit sick, right? Not sick as in sick, but
nobody is ideal.
We're not perfect. So that also means that now that we know that, we can actually get better and become better versions of ourselves. And that, to me, that was interesting.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So I'll just wrap up here because this was a great session. I really, really wanted something like this where like we get very, very practical ideas of what it even means to be attached in a certain manner, right? Like not just romantic attachment, not just concepts that we just talk about, but like with a lot more like, oh, wow, that person behaving like, oh, that's so familiar. And that kind of response is what kind of I was looking for everybody. Like, because if you can see the relevance and the relations for you, at least it can also give you a good idea of what kind of people you're around. What are you like, right? What have you been experiencing and what could you be, right? And we start realizing that we're a lot more complex than just the simple 4 quadrants. But what happens is that how do we build ourselves? I think because that's the beautiful part of this conversation. We're not talking about, hey, you're anxious type, you better like that. It's not about that. It's about how can we get closer to secure attachment style. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about this conversation for me. And it's always a reminder that we're always moving and growing. And no matter what style you come from, it's always good to communicate more and manage that emotions of that space. And with that, I thank everybody for being part of this session. We shall stop the streaming and feel free to hang around for a bit if you want to talk more. Yes, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. I will.
And I got a question.
Yes, sure.
So just now you're talking about when you do the personality test, right? You're going by instinct rather than logical. So actually, what's the right manner to approach personalities? How should we really respond? The first answer that came to mind, or you think it through before you answer?
So, like Alex just nodded his head. So, Alex, you go first.
Yeah. So the most instinctive response would be the best one to use for most of these personality tools. And I think if you have you have not taken the Clifton Strengths yet. So if you take the Clifton Strengths assessment, you actually have a 20-second time limit on each one. So what it does is it forces you to use your most top of the mind answer. So your most instinctive answer would generally review your most
deepest, darkest secret.
Yeah, I mean, your most innate,
self
response, right? And I think that is what describes your personality, so that you can do that. Now I've done some of these assessments with, so I did a career profiling with someone. And the person was saying that, when I did it, I wasn't just thinking about what I was interested in, I was assessing its earning potential. I was like, no, you're not supposed to do that for the profile. Say, I skewed the profile a little bit. It's like, okay. So the profiles are designed to measure a certain element, and the more off the part of your mind, the more instinctive your response, the better it is.
The more raw. So I will go back to this, right? Whenever I talk about personalities or identities of people, I focus on the core traumatic thought processes. So there are multiple. So I've recently have been structuring this in a rather interesting format. But the core of your immediate response is very, very important to you. So dismissive avoidant type, which is what I want to talk about, is also they are not very often aware of their deep first thought, because. But Jeffers is a bit different. Jeffers is actually very aware, so he just doesn't react too much to it. Whereas a lot of dismissive avoidant type that I know don't even know their emotions, know their immediate response, know what their thoughts are, because they already have automatic sequences to ignore those thoughts.
Yep. And if you read the attachment theory book, the one that I shared 2 weeks ago, they talk about your primary emotions. So even in attachment theory, if you do not address the primary emotions, then you have the secondary one, which is in response to your ignoring the first one. So it gets a bit more complicated. And then you're dealing with your secondary, which is now superficial, your more top level, but there are things buried beneath. So the more you're able to deal with your primary feelings, the healthier you will be in terms even for.
But how can you for sure know what is your primary feeling though? If you are so used to that thought process of not admitting that you are feeling that way until you so-called like overlook, it's always possible.
Alex, you want to answer or you want me to answer?
You take that.
Okay, this one, my favorite way of describing this. You will never know for sure. You just keep trying. My favorite way of answering this, because and even until today, right, I'm learning new things about myself because we can't take care of ourselves. I'll use that term. Always go back to that. You can't take care of yourself, which means you'll never actually know until you realize it. So the number of times I removed the trauma and then another one pops up where it was, and I was like, oh. And then as I heal these traumas, right, the thought processes don't leave. They're still there. It's just I'm not affected by them. So then I start gaining awareness of them and start toying with them and start understanding them more. So the greater your awareness of self comes from the ability to just observe yourself, not be attached to the idea of the self. Keep on observing yourself and learning new things about yourself, letting the instinct run through. You might be fully wrong today. It's okay. 5 years down the road, you'll discover new things about yourself regardless. So that's okay. You don't know fully until you try, you expose yourself, you see the limits of your thoughts, and then you go from there.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is to look at the secondary emotions. If you're only aware of the secondary, to be more conscious of them, give them some attention. And when they start to be filled and you can go beyond that, you start to see what is driving it as well. So it can take time, but it also requires us to be brutally honest with ourselves, which is sometimes what's hardest to do, right? To be brutally honest with ourselves and to admit where we are, what our fears are, what we are feeling, what we're vulnerable about. But I also think that that's the only way to really appreciate, know ourselves, and to get healthier. And some people say it gets worse before it gets better. I don't know.
No, it definitely gets worse, way worse before it gets better.
Okay, great question, Faith.
Yeah, Melissa?
Yeah, you might have discussed this earlier before, but I was wondering if you could share like any videos or materials or like workbooks or even like books to read to I don't know, to delve deeper and like to find solutions or to help us move towards secure.
Cool. I think we can definitely continue this offline off streaming. I also have to run to the toilet. I'm sorry. But the other part about this is that I think one of the major things about this is learning about how our minds are constructed from childhood and everything. So actually knowing the attachment styles from childhood behaviors is also a core part of this, because a lot of our attachment styles come from childhood and experiences in the childhood. We need to recognize that every belief we have today roots from childhood. Even with the trauma experiences on top later on, right, in your 20s or 30s, they are often in reaction to those childhood traumas as well. So it's all interacting with one another. So there's a lot of studies into these areas. Alex has done showing this book first.
Yeah, so one of the books that we started off 2 weeks ago was based on this book. So this is the book that I read, and I really
Someone has a TV behind or something.
Oh no, it's because Melissa is right now at Subway.
How do you know?
I saw you eating
Saw
Subway.
you eating
Yeah, eating
Subway.
Subway. Yes.
Is the radio playing? I think. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'm not stalker. I'm not the toilet guy.
At least you never identify which Subway she's in.
Yeah, that's what I don't know.
That'd be scary.
Maybe he even knows. Do you know? You want
I
to
don't
get?
know. I can't tell.
That'd be really scary. Okay, so this is the book that we started off. I shared some information. I shared quite a few slides in the previous session. So if you like to, you can go to the previous session and go through what I shared.
How do I go to the previous session?
Okay, we send her the link.
Yeah, we'll send you the link to our Facebook.
Thank you. What is it? What is it on Facebook?
It's Strengths Alchemy.
Strength. Oh, that's your company.
Is it a company?
Well, it's incorporated.
Startup.
That's his ish thingy lah.
Then Ethan, your company is Tom. Is it Tom Keith?
It's actually so this is the brand that we're having. My company is Undelusional.
What a name. Okay, undelusional.
Yes. It's meant to incite that kind of reaction.
Is it because human beings are known to be quite self-delusional?
Yes, absolutely. So like I said, right, you can't take care of yourself. From today onwards, I'll just keep on using that term.
Because that's absolutely true, right? It's so much better than how hard you press and things like that.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Alex, for that. Yeah, so you can't take care of yourself, and therefore you'll always be delusional.
Never related that to being delusional. I like to use the term that a fish doesn't know it's wet.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But I'd rather you can't take care of yourself because it's a lot more visceral for people.
Okay, it's funnier too.
You start seeing them doing this to themselves.
You can try and it really doesn't work. Okay, so I hope that helps. I'll send you the link in the chat so that you can go check out all previous Quick Connect live videos as well. They are all available there.
Thank you.
No problem.
And I've just shared another book which I'm in the process of reading. The book by Helen Dent. I find that very useful.
Why Don't I Feel Good Enough? Using Attachment Theory to Find a Solution by Helen Dent.
Very cool.
Okay. Cool. Thanks everyone. I'm going to stop the stream.
The live stream? Yes.
And then we can stay and we can chat a bit beyond that. I kept it on because those were good questions.
Yeah, those are very good questions. Thank you for that.